Welcome to the Trade Craft Podcast. I'm Paul Valancourt, and with me today, our very first guest on the very first episode, Dan Tipton. Dan, thank you for coming out.
Well, thank you very much. I'm kind of humbled, actually.
Oh my gosh.
I'm the one that you would select.
Well, it's the first episode. I like to sort of hope that you are going to be the one that launches us, and we'll always refer back to this as the watershed moment that got the whole thing going.
All right, or I'm setting a nice base for me to build on, either way.
So Dan, what is your job title nowadays?
Right now, currently, I'm a production supervisor.
Production supervisor, great. And you've been in the business, per se, for?
Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years, that's great. So you have like a whole variety of experiences. If you guys go and check out his IMDb page, you will see a real sort of arc of a career and of experiences. It's super interesting. You've worked on some really interesting projects that I want to talk about today. But let's go back to the beginning. Where were you born? Like, where did you come from?
I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay,
yeah,
great. And so how does a kid from St. Louis decide to come west to find their fortune? Were you interested in movies when you were a kid, or like how did you make that decision?
Yeah, I think any kid really gets into film, TV when they're young.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, starting around sophomore year, I got into theater. I started performing.
Sure. Okay.
I loved acting. I was really into that.
Sure.
And then from there, when I went to college, I pursued theater in college.
So you graduate from Washington and Lee with a theater degree, right? And so with that sort of powerful degree in your hand, I have one of those as well. I have a master's degree in theater.
Northwestern, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that was money well spent. And so I had that degree. You had this degree, and then what's your next step from there?
Well, I do what anyone with a theater degree will do. Is you go back to school.
Very wisely
to get
done.
your graduate degree. Because there was still that part of me that thought, well, maybe I want to be a college professor someday. Maybe I want to be a teacher, because I had some really good teachers in college that I thought, this looks like a potential avenue as well.
Well, you got this theater degree, and you sort of like started off your career at Washington and Lee with a big role and big. Did you ever think it was part of the equation? Ever like, oh, I'm going to be an actor?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And when did you sort of change track on that? Was it like after you graduated and you were like, oh, what do I do now? And then you went back for your graduate degree. You're like, well, I don't want to do. When did that change?
It suddenly occurred to me. I remember at one point waiting backstage, getting ready to go on. I was doing a Joe Orton play called What the Butler Saw.
Oh yeah.
And I played the doctor, one of the main roles. And I vividly remember standing backstage saying, I really hate this. Why am I doing this to myself?
That's interesting.
It just suddenly hit me. I was like,
you were done.
I think I'm done. I was like, I don't really get the same enjoyment or fulfillment out of this that I had been getting before.
Yeah. You're sort of in graduate school, you've sort of been on this actor route, but then you're like, maybe this is not it. But you're sort of in the right sphere. You're in the right world.
Absolutely.
You know this, right?
Yeah.
So then what was your next turn from there?
Well, so then, at that point too, this sort of coincided with me kind of being overacting. I had directed, I think, a couple things in grad school, and it was not as fulfilling an experience as I had had in college. Whether it was not connecting with the cast, not connecting with the material, not seeing some obvious creative decisions that could have been made that I didn't make. Somewhere along the way, I think what happened was somewhere towards the end of my grad school experience, I suddenly realized I'm not an artist.
That must have been very tough.
Very tough.
And then once you sort of took that thing and you created that blank in your life, what did you fill that blank in with? Or did you know at the time, I'm not an artist, I'm actually
I didn't know.
You didn't know?
No, because after grad school, I then kicked around Springfield, Missouri for a year. It happened. A kid I had gone to high school with. And it's funny, we were actually kind of rivals. We didn't really like each other that much in high school. It was sort of like, it was either he got the roles or I got the roles. I got president of drama club, he got vice president of drama club. It was that back and forth. But he was an incredibly talented person. He ended up collapsing one day and dying, just out of nowhere.
Oh my God.
Heart condition, nobody knew anything about it.
And did you just hear about it?
I'd heard about it through some mutual friends and all that, and it was a very sobering realization because hearing the whole story, he was an incredibly gifted dancer, singer,
oh my gosh,
whatever. But when he died, he was walking home from a matinee performance in Germany. He was doing the touring show of Beauty and the Beast, playing the Candle, traveling the world.
Yeah.
He walked home, he died, but he died doing what he loved to do. He died doing exactly what he had set out to do. that was a very sobering realization.
It's interesting. So you really took from his untimely demise, you took like a really positive lesson, which is
Don't wait.
don't wait.
Don't wait.
Wow.
Why are you screwing around? And it really took my dad to kind of put it all. He could sense that I was just adrift. You know, I came home from the memorial service, and my dad sat me down. He said, "You need to get out of here. Get out of here. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You just spent the last 6 years, and a lot of money was spent. What are you doing? What's your plan?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, why are you wasting your time? Go to LA. Well, I don't have any money." He said, "You'll never have enough money. Do you want to be poor in Springfield, Missouri? Do you want to be poor in LA where there's more opportunity?
Right.
What are you doing?"
Yeah, your dad's a really
Stop
wise man. That's really
wasting
interesting.
the best advice he ever gave me.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, what about Dana?" "Well, I hope she wants to go with you. She's an actress. It only makes sense that she go with
for
you."
sure. And so let's backtrack for just a second. And was Dana getting a theater degree?
Oh, yeah.
At that time?
Oh, yeah, BFA.
So you guys are sort of like aligned.
Yeah,
at
we
least
met
a
each
little-
other in theater class together,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like,
so you
so-
guys are sort of on that road.
We are.
LA's not like, she's like, I want to be a marine biologist. It's like, it was all sort of in the air.
Exactly.
And
But-
so how did you two sort of, this was clearly a pivotal moment for you when your friend passed away or your rival passed away. But how did you, who made that move, or how did you guys make that decision to like, we're going to go west, we're going to go to LA?
Well, when
and
I
do
went,
this?
I drove. You know, I was in St. Louis when this happened. Drove back to Springfield. It was about 3 hours away. Got back to Springfield, and it just happened that day she had a really bad day at work, and she was having a moment of like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And so at that moment, I realized that time to drop this one.
Yeah.
I said, "Let's get out of here." She said, "What do you mean?" I said,
Wow.
"Let's get out of here." "Well, what do you mean get out of here? Like what, go to Denny's or something?" I said, "No, like let's go. Let's go to Los Angeles or New York or Chicago. I don't care. Let's go somewhere.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here and go somewhere where they're actually doing what we have spent the last 6 years training to do."
From that moment, from that conversation to leaving, how long is it?
Like a month.
Wow.
Like we didn't waste any time.
Good for you.
I had
That's
a-
great.
I had a friend who lived out here.
Okay.
I called him up. I said, this had been a buddy of mine from college. We had, I had directed him in a couple of things. We had acted together. We really had a mutual fondness and respect for each other. I called him up. I said, "We're coming." He said, "You can sleep on my floor. It's not a problem."
Wow.
I mean, it was really great. He had a roommate that didn't even know us, but they had a situation where we could sleep on their floor.
That's
And
great.
we stayed on his floor for like a month.
Oh, wow.
He was
That's really
probably
good.
overstayed our
That's a
welcome
good
bit.
friend. That's a
Very
good friend.
He probably to this day was probably like, "Ugh, maybe it should have been 2 weeks," but nevertheless,
Right. But you need to get your feet under you. And
which we did.
So you and Dana, you moved to LA. You're sleeping on your friend's floor.
Right.
So how do you, as they say, get into the business? How did you get into what was your first job? Or well, let me ask you this actually, before we ask. Did you know, like in the broad scheme, you're like, don't wait. I've got to do kind of what I want to do, but you sort of know the sphere, but not necessarily the job per se at this point, right? So what was your first move? You get to LA and you're...
Well, first move is we got to be able to pay for things.
Yeah,
Like,
right, sure.
So, you start off, and for us, it was the temp agencies. We signed them with like Apple One, and I think at Deco, and I got a gig over at Sony, like almost, just like
Wow.
that. Suddenly, I'm working in HR at Sony, and I was really excited. I was like, I get to go to a studio lot. Oh my God.
I'll just say from my experience, I worked on the lot for a little bit. I was working as a friend of mine's assistant, which was a great, easy job. And it was like fun to just walk through the lot and you see like, oh, a bunch of people like dressed up for the Planet of the Apes. And then you see like, oh, this is where they're going to shoot Spider-Man. Oh, this is where this is going to happen.
So cool.
So fun.
So cool.
It's just, you're like, I'm in show business.
Exactly. Like
Oh my
I
gosh,
felt
that's
like
so
such a
exciting.
badass.
Yeah.
The problem is I'm working in HR, which is so not anything to do with anything.
Right.
Just so here I am, filing and scanning. My job was to scan resumes, but the scanner was about 52 years old.
Right.
And so everything it would scan was usually wrong. So then I have to go in and correct the botched scans. That's all I did.
Glamorous show business.
And let me tell you, I was a horrible employee.
Okay.
I was terrible. Well, either way, after 3 months, they were like, it's not working out. So I got bounced after
And
3
you're like,
months.
this pile of filing, does
Yeah.
it work out? That's great. So you got bounced out of there.
Got bounced out of there, and it's probably a good thing. Fortunately, I got another one over at Disney Internet Group. Again, I'm like, wow, Disney Internet Group, even though again had nothing to do with Disney itself, but that ended up being a really great job. I worked in facilities. I was doing shipping and receiving, mail room, That I loved. That was a great job. And that I did for quite a few months. All the while,
Yes.
it's the age-old story of, you have the friends that we had out here, which started our support system. Through them, we met our other friends, and then their friends of friends, and it was through those connections that someone started sending me bootlegs of the West Coast production news, which is sort of like the UTA jobs list or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that usually lets you know what productions were coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent out like 100 resumes in this time period. And back then you had to either fax it or mail it. You can just email it. And I think I got 3 phone calls.
Oh.
2 were for internships for no pay.
Uh-huh.
And the third was, I don't have anything for you, but I do want to meet you. Okay.
It's a very Hollywood call to get.
Yeah, it's just sort of,
Yeah.
I just want to size you up, see if you're not a complete idiot.
Right.
So I meet with this guy over at Los Angeles Center Studios.
Okay.
He was working on phone booth.
Okay.
And he said, look, I don't have anything for you right now.
Colin Farrell, right?
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. This would have been fall of 2000.
Okay.
So he says, I don't have anything for you, but tell you what, check in with me every couple of weeks and hold me to it. All right. A lot of people I say that to and they don't call up and they don't
Right.
check in with me.
That's a great test.
Exactly. But he said, check in with me every so often and we'll see. Because every so often I might need a day player. I might need somebody to come in on the weekends or whatever.
Right.
So I held him to it. And I would check in with him periodically. And then finally the day came. He said, all right, I need somebody to come in on Sunday to just kind of work out of the office and then go and get food for the rigging crew who are going to be working tonight. I was like, okay, great. And it was really cool. I show up and I'm like, to the production office. He says, well, let me take you down to the location, show you around. So we go down to the location.
Wow.
It's downtown LA. And we're walking around like, oh, there's Joel Schumacher. How about that? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, right.
All right. Again, I'm still, everything. I'm still in awe of everything at this point. And I see my first film set, and that's really exciting. And then ultimately the rigging crew got fed. I didn't completely screw that up.
Right.
I went all the way to West Hollywood to get their food because I had no idea the geography of LA. And this was downtown.
So they got fed cold, but fed.
It took me a little bit to learn LA.
But this is your first job in show business.
First job ever.
Really?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Because you're on the set and you're sort of dealing with the crew. Like, you're really in it now.
A little bit.
You're a little bit in
It's still a rigging crew, and it's still the weekend. They weren't shooting, but it was a nice little test. I didn't completely screw that up. So a few weeks later, he brought me back to do the same thing. Again, just a day, feed the rigging crew. I went back to the same place. Because I was the only restaurant I knew in LA.
Right.
Because of the last time. But nevertheless, they all got food.
Kukuru again?
Cafe Luna. I remember it was Cafe
Cafe
Luna in
Luna.
West
Okay,
Hollywood.
okay.
It was a great Italian place. I don't think it's there anymore.
Yeah, I remember.
But so I managed to get a crew fed without completely screwing it up. And that was that. And then after that, just periodically checking in with them. Then the following spring, now mind you, from the time that I sent the resumes to the following spring, that following March, we're talking about 6 months. He finally calls me up and says, all right, I got something for you.
Oh, wow, okay.
I was like, okay. He's like, full-time gig. Can you leave your temp job? I was like, absolutely. They've been waiting for me to get
I'm
this
leaving
call.
now. I'm walking out the door.
They were so cool about it.
That's great.
But he said, all right, I need someone to be a film runner. I'm working on this film. It's working off the central coast of California.
Uh-huh.
So I need you to start your day at Paramount at the cutting room at like 6 a.m. Grab the dailies, take them up to Fort Hunter Liggett. We're talking 4 hours north. Drop off the footage at the cutting room up that they have up there for dailies. Then go to the production office, work in the office. Then when they break film, get the film break, drive back down to LA. And I was going to do this every other day.
Wow.
The days I wasn't doing it, there was somebody else doing it, and I would be on call in LA. The film was We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson,
All right.
and Sam Elliott,
Okay.
and Greg Kinnear, and they gave me a rental car, they gave me a phone,
Wow.
they paid me overtime, which doesn't always happen for PAs, or at least didn't used to.
Because that's a long day. That's 8 hours of driving,
they couldn't get around
plus
it.
whatever else you're going to do in the office.
They couldn't get around it. But you know what? They treated me well, and it was so freaking cool.
That's
it was
awesome.
the coolest thing ever. It was such a great job. I loved it. I had no idea what I was doing, but it did sort of dawn on me. It was like, okay, this is back when they shot on this thing called film, see?
I I've heard of that. I've heard
It's
of that.
35 millimeter, I think.
Right, okay.
But the fact that they would take 35 millimeter film, the negatives of the day, and entrust them to a complete moron who has no idea what he's doing,
Right.
and trust that I will not screw it up, and to trust that I will get back down
Right.
to LA, hundreds of miles, that's
Because basically you're driving with a suitcase with like hundreds of thousands of dollars in it.
millions of dollars when you think about it.
Right.
You know, it is insane that they would trust me with that, but they did.
And so at this point, just to sort of like describe the ladder, this is like you're on the first rung of the ladder now, and your job is technically called what?
I was PA.
PA.
Production assistant.
Great.
But my specific job was the film runner.
Okay.
And, you know, and this is not an uncommon position. I don't know if they still have that job anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure they do, because somebody still shoots on 35 millimeter.
Sure.
But that was my initiation. And that person that got me the job, he was production supervisor on We Were Soldiers. His name's Greg Edler. He and I are still friends. We
that's
still
great.
talk. We still meet for breakfast.
That's awesome.
Now we've reached the point where sometimes I'll recommend him for jobs. He'll recommend me for
Oh, there you
jobs.
go.
It's really kind of a nice.
And so I think what's really interesting about that is like you said, like sort of people who are just getting into the business, I think this is super important, is you sort of make that group of friends,
Yeah.
and you guys all kind of like work up together, and now you sort of made your industry friend,
Yeah.
and like that person moves up and you move up with them, and so and so. So you're working as a PA, so you worked as a PA like for a few productions? I'm gonna sort of just check your sort of IMDb here.
for about a year, yeah.
Great. So We Were Soldiers, fantastic. And then you were also on Big Shot.
Yeah.
And on The Ring.
Yeah,
My wife was in The Ring, incidentally.
That's right, she was. She worked at the Camarillo Hospital.
She did.
That's
she
right,
did,
I remember
yes.
that.
She has like 2 lines. She's very mean to the main character. Yes. And so, but let's move on then. So then you moved up to so you're working at different sort of PA jobs, which is a PA job is sort of can be a variety of things depending on what they need.
Exactly.
From running film to just sort of like in the office, getting food, all this kind of jazz.
All that kind of stuff. You're running things out to set, just basic rote administrative duties out of the office. Sometimes, you know, for a couple days on The Ring, they said, hey, Chris Cooper needs an assistant. Why don't you assist him for a couple of days? He was fantastic. He totally did not need me.
Right.
But it was kind of fun. He was like, you know what, it would really help us if you could run lines with me. I'm like, I can't believe I'm running lines with Chris Cooper.
That's amazing.
This is freaking amazing.
That was
cool.
the dream scenario
Watching
for a PA.
his process was really cool.
That's really great.
And by the way,
Super
Chris
fun.
Cooper, he does not appear in The Ring at all.
Yeah.
If you watch The Ring, this is a fun little factoid.
Okay, here we go.
If you watch The Ring, if you're familiar with the moment where the main lead character picks up his coffee and there's a coffee ring on a newspaper.
Yeah.
Look at the headline on the newspaper. Look at the photograph on the newspaper. If you look closely, you'll see that is Chris Cooper's character. He's a serial killer that kills people by way of burning them alive.
Right, because they referenced it at the beginning.
Yes.
Yes.
But he got cut out of the film. But if you look at the
interesting.
newspaper, you can sort of see that that's Chris
so
Cooper.
interesting. Right, because she's Naomi Watts, I think, right?
Yes.
Is a reporter.
Yes.
And she has just covered this story. So it's sort of like, in the final version, it seems a little bit of a red herring.
Yes.
Yes, I got you.
Yes.
So you're working as a PA, you get to do everything from like running film to running lines.
Right.
With super interesting, super fun. But then your next sort of like move up the ladder is production secretary.
Correct.
Great. So tell me about that. What is that? And that's on, so you're working on Terminator 3. Like,
Terminator
it's
3.
so fun. Like, your
Yes.
resume is really interesting. Your
Yeah.
IMDb is just like one fun thing after another. Nothing like, that's a terrible film. But they're all so interesting. It's all really fun stuff. So,
Right.
but you sort of move up to production secretary. So what does that mean?
Well, what that means is that also too can be a variety of things.
Okay.
Some people see production secretary as just a glorified PA, just a PA you pay more money to.
Okay.
But other people see production secretary as being sort of almost like a non-union assistant production coordinator.
Okay.
You're more confined to the office.
Uh-huh.
You're doing more distribution. You're doing more clerical and administrative duties
Right.
all day long. Sometimes you are the one who is telling the PAs where they need to go and when they need to get there.
Right.
Sometimes you have more direct dealings with the ADs on set. And on Terminator 3, for the second unit specifically, what that meant was there was just me, one PA, and a production coordinator.
Okay.
So there was no one in between. So that meant I ended up having, and this was actually a good thing, I had to deal more directly with the production reports than I would normally have to do if we had an APOC.
Right.
So that was actually a really good experience for me because it really got me ahead of the curve as far as understanding how production reports work,
Right.
and having to deal with the ADs on a more day-to-day basis. Like it was a really good experience.
So again, a theme that I'm sort of realizing in your story that I really find interesting is that it's not the job or the school or the whatever per se, but it's the opportunity and sort of how you take advantage of that opportunity that's presented. Because you could say, oh, this really isn't my job, but this is more or whatever. But you really leaned into that and you learned, and that was able to sort of like, oh gosh, I have this opportunity to do more work and to learn something new. And then you move up to the next thing. You're production secretary for a couple of gigs.
Yeah, for a few gigs, exactly, for about a year or two.
And then what's your next sort of big move up the ladder?
Well, the next step then was assistant production coordinator.
Okay, great. So tell us, so the production coordinator and assistant production coordinator, what does that entail?
What that entails is you have more dealings with the crew in general.
Are you on set more then?
No.
No, you're still sort of just logistics from the office?
Production office, logistics, but now your duties increase in scope. So now, you might still have some of the basic administrative rote duties that you would find with production secretary. But now you have to worry more about facilities issues. Like, okay, we want to make sure that the stage is operating properly, that we've got AC for stage, we've got power turned on at stage.
Great.
Maybe it's about making sure that the production offices have all the machinery that we need, making sure that all
So the real nuts and bolts that we maybe, I think when we think of making movies, we don't think of this, but this is really how a movie runs.
Right.
We need copy machines. We need like all these different things, feeding the crew. We never think of that as part of, but that's all part of movie making.
It's all part of movie making, and the production office is usually responsible for, I guess it's if you're using a corporate model, we're facilities, we're operations, we're communications, we're purchasing, and procurement. Like we are all these things lumped into one small unit.
It's like this needs to be here, and I need this. I need a car to move this, and I need money to make that happen.
The grips need more dollies, or they have a special package that needs to be dropped at location. Do we have the address for the location? In what phase does transportation need to be involved? Do we need to talk to transportation to get it done, or is the department spoken to transportation? But either way, we have to make sure it gets purchased, delivered, and then if it needs to be picked up and returned to the vendor, all within a time that's not going to cost you more money.
Right. And so at this point, you're officially in show business. Like you've been in show business for a little while now. And so sort of on your journey, though, you realize, oh, I'm not an artist. I'm this other thing. Yeah. Are you sort of getting now a clearer version of what that thing is?
Absolutely.
Good. And as that comes into focus, what is that coming? Are you able to sort of articulate, oh, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I am now.
Right. And at that point, I realized, okay, I think my path is more clear. I think I'm on down sort of this initially coordinating, but then I'm like, well, maybe supervisory or even management level, maybe even producer level track.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of when it came into focus for me. And because there's no one way into the industry, there's no real one way to produce it or UPM or whatever. There are multiple avenues you can take. There's some people that do locations that become producers. There are people that do transportation that become producers. And there are people who, the most clear-cut path is through the ADs. They become producers and UPMs.
Okay.
But production office is another route you can go.
And so you sort of move up and then you become a production coordinator. Right? And then you're on The Amazing Spider-Man as a production coordinator for the second unit. So, there's a lot of really great films on here. Domino's, one of my favorites. You worked on CSI Miami, Ghost of Girlfriend's Past. But The Amazing Spider-Man is, by any definition, a blockbuster. So you're on this big blockbuster situation now.
Right.
How does that change sort of the pressure, the tempo, the feeling, or like you're the production coordinator for the second unit.
Correct.
So tell me about that, sort of like, because there's like, I imagine a lot more like focus on you, and the studio's probably looking at you a lot more, and there's like, we've got a release date already.
Oh, it's
and
a tentpole. It is the tentpole.
Absolutely.
It was shot in 3D, so the camera rigs were insane. Not to go too deep, but it's still fascinating. You don't get, if you have 3 cameras, you don't have just 3 cameras. It's more like 6 cameras.
Right, sure.
The rigs are like a 2-camera setup. You've got tons of backup, because it's all shot digitally. So you have guys with like 32 terabyte hard drives, and you've got 3 or 4 different ways to back up the footage for the day. And the files are so gargantuan because it's shot on 3D. So there were certainly new crew members that I had never heard of before. I was like, wait a minute, who are these guys?
Right.
But
because there's a whole new set of job responsibilities for 3D film.
There is.
So let me ask you this. Moving from, let's say this, I think sometimes like your work as the assistant production coordinator, right? And then you're the boss. You're the production coordinator,
Right.
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 So, what was the biggest transition, or was there a big lesson that you learned moving from like reporting to someone to being the person that people reported to? You said early on when you were sort of the production secretary, the PAs reporting to you, but
Right.
they're just like PAs, like I got the food, whatever. but now you're really like in the thick of it, right?
Right.
And you're the production coordinator on a big Hollywood, like literally this is like it, right?
Right.
You're on a big Hollywood blockbuster, so and so. You're the guy now. Was there a big lesson or a big thing like to share with our audience to really make it valuable to them? Was there something that you learned or something you wish you would have learned earlier or easier in that transition?
Well, I'd say in the role of production coordinator, to be clear, second unit, if done right, can be a much easier experience than with the main unit, because the main unit that was crazy. Like it was, you had tons of actors every day.
Right.
Like there was another production. I think there was another production coordinator over on the main unit.
Sure.
Her job, I can tell you now, was a lot harder than mine. That
Right.
much I can assure you.
Because that's like the main unit. That's like all the stars and all the extras and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And in every second unit, I think is a little bit different. What was your second unit?
Stunts.
Stunts. Great.
Worked with one of, if not the best, stunt. Well, he's more than a stunt coordinator. He's a second unit director. His name's Vic Armstrong.
Okay.
If you ever want to, just
First of all, if there's a more stunt person named than Vic Armstrong, I don't know what that could
there are
be.
few names bigger in the stunt world.
That's a
than
great stuntman name.
And when I was on Terminator 3, which was also a second unit, that was Simon Crane, also big, huge name
Great.
in the stunt world. Like these two guys are cream of the crop. The level of precision that is expected of a second unit, you're following behind. Ideally, you're following behind the main unit. They'll shoot something out. All right, we've shot this out. Now bring in the stunts and enter a Vic Armstrong and his team of incredibly gifted, incredibly talented stunt performers and coordinators, and they bang it out.
And in a unit like that, that's all stunts. I'm sure on every unit it's like this, but especially in this unit, safety must be a real big concern.
The main concern.
Because these guys are like literally putting their butts on the line, like in the most literal way possible.
It is the primary concern. Because it's not just the stunts. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, stunts and special effects are usually working together. And depending on the stunt, depending on what's in the script, that's when pyros get involved. You got explosions, you have cars flipping over, you've got, there has to be, almost a perfect, symbiosis between those two.
Right, because if one of those things is off, like if you fall off a building, you could break your arm, but you could get blown up too. Like there's a lot of things that could go wrong. So I'm sure that safety must be. So as a production coordinator, how involved are you in those safety decisions or those safety discussions?
On the coordinator level, you're not really part of the decision per se. You still have to kind of work at the behest of whatever your supervisor or UPM or the stunt coordinator or second unit director specifically say they want. If there's, like for example, it's not uncommon, especially in these big movies, to have an ambulance standing by.
Yeah.
That's a very common thing. And Schaefer Ambulance is kind of the go-to company. They've been doing it for years. And that's the big thing is the production coordinator. Usually you're the one ordering the ambulance and you have to make sure it's there, it's ordered, it's booked, they've got the call sheet, they know where they need to be. Because woe unto he or she that does not book that ambulance.
Right.
Because that could be the difference between life and death.
For sure. That's a big choice. That's a big responsibility.
I know at one point our supervisor, just sort of doing a double check, walked up to Vic and even asked him, he said, "Now Vic, are you going to need an ambulance on this day?" And he said it was the only time that Vic ever got visibly angry. And it was basically, his reaction was, I don't ever want to be asked that question.
Right.
Always assume we expect it.
For sure.
And he cited a couple of instances where there had been a death because there weren't medical professionals on hand, and I think it was a very sobering experience for myself, and I heard about it, secondhand.
Right.
But also I think for that supervisor realizing, okay, and you know what, you do not begrudge Vic Armstrong for getting angry about this.
Yeah.
This is what he comes to expect. This is what he needs, because he and every stunt coordinator out there and every second unit director out there, it's safety first. They value it deeply.
Sure, I imagine.
And because unfortunately, our industry is littered with examples of injuries, life-altering injuries, in some cases deaths, that we always have to refer back to. Anytime there's a question, all right, do we need this ambulance? Do we need a medic out here while they're rigging? do we need to rehearse this one more time? There's any variety of circumstances where we ask ourselves just out of purely logistical or fiscal reasons that we say, all right, do we really need this? And all you have to say, or everyone should say, all right, well, let me ask myself this. Is this the safe decision?
Right.
And if you can say, no, this is not the safe decision, find the safe
Figure it
answer.
out.
You know?
Yeah, because I imagine there's a lot of competing pressures of speed and money
Sure.
and safety
Sure.
and artistic sort of value or whatever. I mean, all those dimensions are kind of, but ultimately, sort of when you're making recommendations or you're sort of doing your job properly, you feel like you're trying to put that safe decision at the top of the list.
Absolutely.
And
it's
then
easy to forget. It is very easy to
for
forget.
sure, because I'm sure like money people aren't coming and saying, what's the safe decision? They're like, we got to make our day,
Right.
we've got to keep moving forward, all this kind of stuff.
And I will say, too, that anytime you say to someone, look, I made the safe choice here, or I think this is the safest choice, 9 out of 10 times they're not going to push any further.
Good, that's good to hear.
Because everyone knows the story that where there's that god awful Twilight Zone catastrophe, which is, I don't know, what is it, 30 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, quite recently, the Sarah Jones incident from like 6 or 7 years ago. Those are examples of what happens when you bend to the pressure of, because the creatives are there trying to get the job done. They want their shot, or they want their location, or they want what they want. And so someone in a producerial position, or ADs, or locations, or whatever, sometimes someone has to be the one to step forward and say, no, we cannot do this.
Right.
We cannot have children working after midnight, Mr. Landis.
Right.
No, we need to have stunt performers there underneath the helicopter that's going to be flying too low. Or no, we don't have a permit to be on that railroad track. And yeah, we might lose our day. That's the problem. No one wants to be the one that says, we're going to lose our day.
Right.
Because we don't have the location.
Right.
No one wants to be that guy.
Right.
But I guarantee you, every single person that's gone on trial for this or had their careers basically ruined because of bad decision making, they probably go back and say, maybe we should have just taken the hit or found something else to shoot that day.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things that you don't get a do-over on those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's when you're dealing with so many people and so many elements and so many things, it's got to be, I'm sure, nerve-wracking to make that safe decision that's maybe unpopular in the moment.
Sure.
And when it all turns out fine, people are like, see, it was fine.
Well, and that's the thing, is that's the catch-22.
Isn't it?
If someone had stepped forward and put their foot down and said, no, someone in Midnight Rider and said, no, we're not going to be shooting today. I don't care. We don't have a permit. It's unsafe. It's not happening. Well, then you just lost tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay?
Right.
And you'll never know if you were right.
Exactly.
That's the problem. You never know if you're right.
Yeah.
So all that person can do is say, you know what? I made a decision. It was a safe decision, and I can walk away unapologetically for it.
Yeah.
And maybe I am wrong, but you know what? I'd rather we not know if I was wrong.
Right, for sure. And I think sort of the encouraging thing that you're saying though is that most people get it. And once they're called to attention, you sort of really say, hey, this is a safety issue, that people get, oh yeah. It's just movies, like
Absolutely.
in a sense.
It's just keeping your ears open to that. If the stunt coordinator comes to you and says, I don't like this, this is not safe, what he or she is saying might end up costing you a lot more money. And you might roll your eyes about it. You might be like, oh God, that means I got to bring in another couple stunt riggers for $2,000 plus fringe. Oh my God, we're already over budget. This is going to kill us. But at the end of the day, you don't want to screw around with that. I'd rather overthink it. That's another thing. You will have people say you're overthinking this, or you made a bad decision. Why would you do that? Or I don't like how you handled this. If you can say I made the safe decision, I say walk away unapologetically.
That's great.
I'd rather spend an extra $10,000 on people's safety than being paraded around on deadline as that schmuck who's on the witness stand.
Right, for sure. Yeah. I think this is one of the things I really like about doing the podcast is, again, this is another piece of the puzzle that, like, when you think of, production or whatever, you think of like, oh, stars and trailers and catering and demands. But I don't really, good thing I'm not a producer, I suppose, I don't really think of the safety issue, which seems like a thing that overarches everything else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because you figure, speed is always an expectation. You've got a finite amount of time to get everything shot. And depending on the format you're shooting, sometimes you have even less time, and you want to hit your number. You want to get it all done with the allotted time within the schedule. And the ADs give you the schedule at the beginning of the project, whether it's an episode, a half-hour episode that's 5 days, 1 hour episode that's 8 or 9 days, or a movie that can be 20, 25, 30, 30 or 120 days. You kind of want to hit that mark because the budget is tethered to that. So when you've got 150, 200 people, sometimes 300 people, all trying to work at that breakneck speed, all of them in their own way trying to save money, save time, but also deliver whatever it is the artists want, it's easy to overlook these sorts of things. And with you have everyone moving around so quickly, and a lot of the time you're off the lot, so you're a stranger in a strange land. You're in a location. Maybe it's residential, so you've got residents to worry about.
Right.
You're on a busy street. It's easy to forget all of these things because everyone's just working so quickly, and it's so easy for people to overlook the safety element, which is why you have medics on set. Which is why if you're doing stunts, big time explosions. Maybe you do want that ambulance there.
Right.
It's getting crew to wear safety vests. It's a pain. You sound annoying. Some of them are more receptive than others.
Right.
But if you're working on a busy street, you have to wear those safety vests. It's not because drivers aren't going to see you. It's just in case.
Right.
Because God forbid, if you don't offer it to them, if you don't provide them with what they need, and someone does get hit, does get hurt, or worse.
Right.
The first question is, well, did they not have a safety vest on? Well,
Right.
no. Well, why not? Why did you even, continue working the day without making sure people had this necessary safety precautions?
And as a production coordinator, you have that bigger, I think sort of on a film set, everyone sort of is the main character of their own story.
Yeah.
Like set, dressing, things that, hold on, we got to make sure that, and then camera, and then let everyone sort of sees their really specific piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
So as a production coordinator, and then later as a producer, you really need to keep that whole, step back and see that bigger vision of the whole thing.
Exactly.
So let's talk about producing. So on a show called LA to Vegas, you were a producer. How did that change your responsibilities, or was it an evolution? Tell me about that, moving from being a production coordinator to a producer. What was that like?
Well, it was a gradual thing because up to that point I had a chance to production supervise, production associate producer, which is basically just supervisor but with bigger title. It's the level of accountability, I think, is the biggest change. Because up to that point, I had been the guy just below the producer. So I was the salacious crumb to the job of the hut. Suddenly you're Jabba.
You really nailed show business. Right on.
So suddenly you're Jabba. Suddenly
Right.
you're making these decisions. Now that's not. I mean, you still have to answer to the showrunner, or whatever executive producers are attached to the show. Creative writing or non-writing. But you also have to answer directly to the studio on a level that maybe prior to that you didn't have to.
Right.
So if the budget is wrong, you have to answer for that. If your episode goes over, you better answer for that. You better, well, hope you guys come under in the next one.
So let me ask, just so people can get a real sense of it, I kind of get a sense of what you're doing as a production coordinator. So then when you move to producer, what additional responsibilities, obviously you're taking on more responsibility per se, more accountability per se, but are there other sort of elements that you're in charge of or in control of as a producer?
Absolutely. Well, money, the money being spent. You control, or you have to govern where the money is best placed.
So as production coordinator, you're moving that money around, but you're sort of doing that sort of under the auspices of the producer sort of.
Absolutely. You've got 2 or 3 or even 4 people above you when you're a coordinator. You're still basically just nuts and bolts logistics, and just you have 3 or 4 people telling you what you need to do or what is important for that day. But then as you move up, you think there's more big picture interest the higher up you go.
And then do you start making the call of no, we don't need 5 cars. We can do 4 cars.
Yeah, sometimes you do.
So then you're doing that. So now you're really in the process.
Exactly.
As a producer, you're now in that bigger conversation. You have a seat at that table where you're really touching what appears on camera in a way that as a production coordinator or sort of below that level, you're
never
not.
have to worry about it. Yeah.
Someone else does that, they're like, I want 5 cars. I got 5 cars for you. Right?
No, when you're a producer, you say, you don't need 5 cars, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
Or you don't need 150 background. Or if we're shooting in this kind of a room, this should be our angle right here. that you don't need 150 background. You're good with like maybe 80. You know? Now, you make that decision and it does blow up in your face. You got to answer for it.
It looks really empty in there.
It's like,
so let me ask you this: as you get into this producing position and you're sort of making those calls, making the decisions, do you feel like you're sort of like making a full circle of your situation, coming back to the artistry a little bit, right?
In a way. The thing I've always enjoyed in that, and I had the opportunity to do this as a supervisor production AP, and I really enjoyed it, and I stuck with that when I was producing on LA to Vegas. And that was, I loved location scouting, not the tech scout or even the director scouts, doing the pre-scouting, really helping steer the ship on where we're going to be shooting. Because in television, it's not like features, from the word go, the director has a lot of say in those locations. But in television, it's more the writers that really, and the director does weigh in once they come onto the show and once they have a chance to look at everything. But generally speaking, you kind of have to be ahead of the game. So when they do arrive, you're like, all right, these are the locations we have for you, or these are some of the location options we have. Pick one. And then
ultimately, you also worked on Modern Family for a long time. Was that for 4 seasons? You said
5 seasons.
5 seasons.
Yeah.
That's a great show that I think a lot of people will recognize. Was that like a welcome change of pace to be sort of on something so steadily for so long?
Oh yeah, it was great. It was great because by the time I got it, I jumped on season 4. That show ran itself in a lot of ways.
Right.
That's not to say that I didn't have something to do periodically, but there definitely is more just simply just being there just in case, or being eyes and ears for the UPM, so she could focus on maybe budget.
And when you were on sort of your IMDb sort of says a lot of different things about Modern Family, but when you were on that show, did you do a bunch of different jobs, or did you transition throughout your career, or what were you doing specifically on Modern Family?
Well, on Modern Family specifically, to start off with, I was sort of overseeing the production office. That's where they felt like I was most needed. Was okay. Get them into shape because they needed to tighten things up a little bit. We wanted to make sure the communication flow was improved. So I was still I ended up doing some more coordinator type duties on that.
Yeah, let me just sort of hang a lantern on that for a second. So I think it's really interesting that they sort of brought you in for this thing. Do you feel like as a producer or production coordinator or whatever that you sort of get known for, if you need to tighten up the ship, Dan Tipton's your man. He's going to like crack the whip and like really get it.
You can be, yeah. Because there were a couple of circumstances in my career where they said, all right, we need to bring somebody in to kind of like tighten things up a little bit. And I think I'm pretty good at that. What I'm not is this fire and brimstone type. I'm not a I'm not a drill sergeant. Well, because everyone has a different style. And if I yell, I just sound like a brat. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I'm not intimidating. I'm just not. Yeah, I know who I am. So, but it's just sometimes it's about micromanaging a little bit, which I hate doing that, but I know something, at least initially, that was sort of the expectation. And then eventually, as they get into the rhythm, then you can pull back a little bit. Then you can focus more on bigger picture things. I think where I was best utilized was, it's Modern Family. It shoots it's so simple. It works quickly. There aren't a lot of big concept moments. However, from time to time, it's like, all right, we need to get a bunch of boats for this one episode. All right, bring in the fixer. Bring in Dan. Dan will make sure.
Dan's going to find a bunch of boats.
Dan knows how to get a marine coordinator who can get all the boats and get them all out to the lake and yada yada.
So really, at that point, they're really sort of just getting you for your experience.
Right.
And that you're just like a Swiss Army knife. And you'll do this, you'll do that. You're sort of like, you'll fill whatever sort of out of the ordinary. Like generally you said, it runs itself.
Right.
But when there's that out of the ordinary thing, you're there and you make it happen.
We need to get into Staples Center for a Kings game. We want to be as close to the ice as possible. And we want to shoot a scene with Ed O'Neill down there as close to the ice as possible. And we need to make this happen. But I was the one that sort of had to day find a way to get us out there.
Right.
Or we need an airplane, and we need an airplane on stage. Okay. Enter Dan. That's kind of when I felt like my skills were best put to use.
And do you feel like now that you've sort of done it for a while and you sort of have done these different sort of pieces of the puzzle, do you feel like when that big sort of call comes in, you pick up the red phone, they're like, we need a plane, we need some boats, whatever. Do you feel like then that it's like do you feel like a rush of excitement, like, oh, wow, something new, something different, I'm going to make this happen?
Yeah, I do. I mean, look, when you're in the midst of it, you're like, oh my God, shoot me now. Because, sometimes certain people ask questions, you're like, I don't have really, don't ask me that question. Just let me
Right.
deal with this. Or,
Right.
before you call so-and-so, rather you call so-and-so. I was like, no, you don't understand. It's better I call this. Other than that, it's at the end, when the end result is I got it done, and
Yeah.
we delivered what was expected and then some, then I feel good. Then I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah.
I didn't screw it up. We made the day. It looked good.
Yeah.
I gave them what they needed, and I didn't completely bollocks it up. All right, I feel pretty good.
And that's
I feel the rush then from that.
yeah, and that's your sense of satisfaction of like,
Absolutely.
oh, I really made this piece of the puzzle happen.
Absolutely.
That's really great. Yeah. And then so you were on that for 5 seasons, and now you're working on 911
Lone Star.
Lone Star. I want to
Right.
say Long Shot. That was not it. I knew that for sure. Lone Star. And so what is your title on this? What are you doing? on
Okay,
this
I'm
one?
production supervisor on this.
Great. Okay.
I'm one of 2 production supervisors.
Okay.
It comes from the Ryan Murphy world. It's
Okay.
his creative team. It's his writers. Tim Minear is the showrunner on it. Tim Minear is a longtime, part of the Ryan Murphy stable.
Okay.
So when you're thinking Ryan Murphy, it is big. It is
Yeah.
big. It is
Yeah.
huge. It is big concept. It's a big crew. It's a big show. A lot of nights, long days, a lot of really cool stunts and special effects. A lot more spectacle than you would find on a Modern Family. A very, very different.
Right. Each show
form
seems
of
like it
film.
might have its own personality.
Every
and its
show's a
sort of-
snowflake.
Yeah.
It just and it's actually kind of fun. I'm actually enjoying this because it's like, I'm kind of getting back to like the big blow 'em up stuff like I had
Yeah.
experienced on T3 or I experienced on We Were Soldiers or The Ring or whatever. Like this feels big and
Right.
and grand.
that's great.
And that's a lot of fun. But my job right now is I just recently kind of got onto it, so I think we're still kind of figuring out what my role is. But I think and right now I'm kind of in that Swiss Army knife phase of all right, we'll put Dan, he's the spackle. All right, we need someone to kind of oversee the riggers. Okay, we need someone to be out on set and kind of go through the call sheet and go through the PR, see like strategic places we can maybe save a little bit of money.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. We want Dan to work. They have me working with the stunt crew a lot and with the special effects and just trying to make sure they're on the same page.
And so I just have a couple more questions, and one sort of off of that idea is the idea that like, do you feel like looking backwards at your experiences, at your resume, do you feel like that sort of all kind of made you, prepared you for that Swiss Army situation? Like when you were working on Spider-Man or you're working on this, you're like, oh yeah, that's where I learned this, that's where I learned that. And
Absolutely.
so you sort of bring all that. And so I'm sort of just trying to get a sense of like, as evolution, like, do you feel like that's the evolution in this career track is like picking up these skills as you go and sort of getting a more and more sort of full comprehensive tool belt to make these things happen, do these different things?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the fun things about this job is that there's no one way to do it.
Yeah.
But when somebody comes to you and say, all right, I need a Black Hawk helicopter next week, I'm the one that says, okay, all right, I'll call the Department of Defense,
Right.
ask for their entertainment division, and they'll get me in touch with the liaison, and I'll say I need a Black Hawk helicopter with a full crew, and this is where we're going to be doing it. This is the scope of the job, and if everything goes well in that interaction, they say, okay, great, well, we can work. There's a ton of paperwork that goes into that,
Right,
but in
yeah.
theory, they say, all right, fine, you'll have it. And we're going to call it a mission, so it'll only cost you fuel. And but just understand that they can suddenly be deployed.
Sure.
If in the event of a military action, you could suddenly lose your day due to it. Just know that. It's like, okay,
Right.
fine. And these are the kinds of things that you encounter. And I know to do this. I know to do this because I worked on the invasion. The invasion, we had a Black Hawk helicopter
Sure.
twice, and so I know what to do.
Well, yeah, I think that's really interesting. Sort of all those different lessons. So let me ask you this: when you look back at your career, do you feel like there was like, or can you point to maybe an idea or two, something that you sort of learned on the job that if someone was like writing down the responsibilities of these different jobs, no one would ever say it, no one would ever think it, but now oh, this is really a responsibility of this job or this career track that maybe people don't think of.
Right. The big thing is, and I always say this, accountability.
Accountability.
I don't think when you're a PA or you're even an APOC or I think around coordinator you start to understand it. It's the level of accountability. Mm-hmm. The more they pay you, the more accountability you have.
Sure.
But that also means you have to answer for some things. good or bad, right or wrong. You know, it's, and also too, it can be a very alienating position. I think that's another thing. I mean, you can have a good experience and a good relationship with your crew, with the various department heads. You know, it can be a very pleasant experience between them, but at the end of the day, you're over here, and they're oftentimes are over there. There is an alienation.
Right. Because you're the one in charge, and you have to make the tough calls.
You're the ivory tower. You're the bad guy. You're the enemy. The worst thing you can ever say to a crew member is, we just don't have the money. Or we don't have money for you, or we're just trying to save money. They don't like hearing that.
Right.
Because when you're telling them that, and then meanwhile, here's an actor who's getting, Fiji water in their fridge, and they're like, not enough money, huh? Okay. It's you try to avoid that, even though deep down everyone kind of knows money is a factor. I guess it just comes down to just knowing what the value is of each monetary decision. Like, all right, if spending an extra amount of money here gets us the location that we need, that makes this scene pop, and this scene has, that's another thing, this is where the creative comes in. This scene has an elevated emotional element that's critical to telling the story this week, spend the extra money. If it's a nothing burger scene that's just mundane dialogue, expository, that's leading up to the big money shot or the big money scene, then find a way to do it on stage, or find a way to do it in a cheap, or maybe we just have to throw up 4 walls, from our, if we have a scene doc, just try to find out where the value is.
That's really interesting. And that value you feel like is the final impact it has on screen.
Right.
That's really interesting.
But you also have to, you should value your crew. I think that's one thing, is that, anytime the crew feels as though they are not valued, and feel as though that they are just worker bees there to do our bidding, you lose your crew. You alienate them, and they won't go the extra mile for you.
Right.
As long as the crew feels like they're valued in some way, whether it's making sure the craft service doesn't suck. Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Some of them it's about, all right, you know what? Make sure they have at least 10-hour guarantees. Whether or not we shoot, like Modern Family became notorious famous for their incredibly short days. Well, there came a point they're like, crew are going to bail if they're not getting their money's worth. So then you have to say, all right, do we need to give them 10-hour guares? These are the questions you have to ask. And if you have a crew that's maybe getting a 12-hour guarantee, because those shows exist, do you tell them, hey, I'm paying you for 12, you better give me 12. Well, if you tell that to a crew, some crew will be like, all right, I'll give you 12, but I'll take 14 to do the job. Versus if you say, I'll give you 12, fill it however you want, they'll be done in 8 or 9.
That's really important. Valuing the crew, making them feel like you appreciate the hard work that they're doing.
Because you should, because these individuals make the impossible possible. They are all overworked. They all are away from their families. Sometimes, figure 60 hours minimum out of the week. They don't see their families.
Yeah.
Where some people have 9 to 5s and can see their families, they can't. Sometimes it's odd hours. Sometimes they have to work overnight. Sometimes they have to be there at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning,
Right.
Before anyone else shows up. Just make sure the crew is valued. Make sure they feel like they matter and that they're part of the process. And sometimes we succeed at that. Sometimes we fail.
Sure.
But as long as you just remember, look, these are human beings with families and lives, and
yeah, I think that's super important. And in any job, when someone feels valued, they will
absolutely
do so much. So let me just wrap up with one thing. First of all, this has been really fascinating, just sort of to hear sort of your journey and the ins and outs. And as I said, almost every step, like, oh, I didn't know that was part of the thing. I didn't know. Like, to hear sort of all the real sort of from your experience, someone who's been through it, is really interesting. And so, do you have, if someone's like sort of on this track or wants to get on this track through production coordinating or up to producing or any of those little steps along the way, right? What is there a piece of advice that you could give to those people looking forward to this sort of career arc?
Well, the one thing that I would say is, let's say, if you're just starting out, like you don't know where to start, whatever. Great. If it's possible, find those internships. If you're in school, if you can get a jump on it, find those internships. Careers have been built on internships. If you first, if you're questioning whether or not, well, should I make the move, should I not? Make the move. Don't waste time. You can figure it out when you get there. Get to LA, get to New York. Just go to where it all is, first and foremost. And then start working those types of angles to get in.
Right.
Because there's no one way. For me, it was just dumb luck. A random resume.
Yes, yes and no. It was dumb luck to a certain extent, but it's like when preparation meets opportunity. Sure. It was like but the opportunity came along, you were able to make something out of that, and you did a good job and hard work. So
Sure.
it's not totally like put off to dumb luck.
No.
You did a great job, and
Right.
that's how you moved along. That's great. And so you're, in a way, it sort of comes back to your initial lesson, which is just do it.
Just do it.
Just go now.
Don't-
Why wait?
Don't wait.
Yeah.
Don't waste the time.
And you feel like getting that internship and learning from someone who's doing it or doing it that's sort of in the midst of it is super valuable.
Super valuable. I've hired a lot of people off of internships.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we had one intern on Modern Family at one point. He was still debating whether or not to go back to school to keep. He was getting ready to graduate. He's like, I feel like I need to go back to school and get more experience working with actors, yada yada yada. And I was like, look, I would never tell someone not to go back to school.
Right.
You're right now working on an award-winning show.
Yeah.
We're about ready to offer you a job. You're 21, 22 years old. You are so ahead of the curve, I can't even tell you. You can graduate and have a job waiting for you. Do you know how rare that is? You realize how unique that is?
Yeah.
Why go to keep learning about it when you can actually be here and actually do it? And learn. Mercifully, he listened to me, stuck around, and now he's like a writer's assistant or something. Which again, how hard that is that?
Super hard.
You're a writer, your wife's a writer. You know how hard it is to get into those rooms.
Yeah, for sure.
But he got in, and he's far, and he's what, 24, 25 now, and still way ahead of the curve. I didn't get started until I was 25.
Yeah.
I would love to have had that extra,
For sure.
2 or 3 years to get my feet wet. But
Yeah,
you know
I
what?
think that's really great. That's a really great lesson. We'll sort of wrap it up there. The idea of like, don't wait. If this is what you want to do, just do. Because ultimately, what you do, you go and you do it. You figure out it's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
Do something else.
Do anything. Just be close to it. Be close to it, because the people who today are doing silly little puppets in their garage could be the next Jim Henson. It could be the next Tim Burton. You just don't know. You just don't know. Just be near it and just do it. Even if it's just setting up a tripod at some street corner and hoping to God the cops don't shut you down because you don't have a permit.
Spoke like a real production coordinator. Oh, we got to get a permit for this tripod.
Just be safe, no matter what.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys for
Thanks,
watching.
guys.
We'll have another one in a week or so. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience and your time, and we really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.